My parents forced me to lose weight for my sister's wedding. Not because they cared about my health, but because they didn't want me to embarrass the family. What happened after? Let's just say I don't think they'll ever forget it. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 26, the middle child in a family where I've always been the odd one out. I'm not tiny or picture perfect like my older sister Jessica. I've always been curvy, and to my parents, that has meant one thing, something to criticize. I grew up with them making little comments, telling me to watch what I eat, comparing me to Jessica. And of course, Jessica never made things easier. She's 28, slim, blonde, and engaged to Daniel, a man my parents adore. They've always treated her like the golden child, while I was the one who got the backhanded remarks and the constant reminders that I wasn't enough. As Jessica's wedding got closer, the comments about my body turned into orders. My mom, Karen, sat me down one night and said, "Emily, you need to slim down before the wedding. These photos will last forever. Do you really want to stand out in the wrong way?" My dad, Robert, didn't even try to soften it. He said, "We can't have you ruining the pictures. This is Jessica's big day. You need to do your part." It wasn't about me, not even a little. It wasn't about my health or happiness. It was about how I would look standing next to Jessica, about how my body would reflect on them. I tried to push back at first, telling them I was fine the way I was, but they kept piling on the guilt. They said things like, "Don't you care about your sister?" And "We're just trying to help you." They made it sound like my weight was a family shame that I had to fix, and after enough nights of hearing that, I caved. So I started. My mom threw out half the food in the kitchen, replacing it with bland diet meals. My dad started sending me links to workout plans. Jessica chimed in too, giving me helpful tips that were really just insults dressed up as advice. "You'll thank me later, Em. No one wants wedding pictures where one person looks out of place." That was her way of saying I wasn't good enough to stand beside her unless I changed. Every day felt like punishment. I was starving, sore, and constantly reminded that none of this was my choice. I dragged myself to the gym, drenched in sweat, hearing my parents' voices in my head. At home, my mom would watch me like a hawk when I ate, making sure I stuck to her plan. There was no kindness in it, no encouragement, just judgment. And the worst part was how invisible I felt. Even when the pounds started to come off, it wasn't about me. My parents didn't say, "We're proud of you." They said, "Good, now you won't ruin Jessica's day." Jessica didn't say, "You're doing great." She smirked and said, "Almost there." It was like I was just a project they were trying to fix, not a person with feelings. I'd lie awake at night, exhausted and angry, asking myself why I even agreed to this. I hated every second of it. I hated the way my parents controlled me. I hated Jessica's smug little comments. And most of all, I hated how powerless I felt. But underneath all that resentment, something else was starting to build. A spark. Because if they thought they could use me and humiliate me without consequences, they were wrong. The changes started almost immediately. My mom filled the refrigerator with prepackaged meals that tasted like cardboard, and she measured every portion, as if I couldn't be trusted with a spoon. My dad insisted on driving me to the gym before work, standing by the treadmill while I ran, like I was a child being supervised. Every choice I made was questioned. If I reached for something not on their list, I'd get a sharp look or a comment about how Jessica would never. The comparisons never stopped. My mom would hold up one of Jessica's dresses and say, "This is the shape we're going for." My dad flipped through old photo albums and pointed out how Jessica always kept herself disciplined. It wasn't advice. It was a reminder that no matter what progress I made, I would still be measured against her. Jessica herself acted like she was helping me. She'd lean in with that soft, fake smile and say, "Trust me, Em, you'll thank me later." No one wants wedding pics ruined. It wasn't said in anger, but in a way that made it clear she saw herself as doing me a favor. Every word out of her mouth chipped away at me. She wasn't encouraging me. She was reminding me that I was a problem to be fixed. I stopped feeling like their daughter, or her sister. I felt like a project under construction. Every bite of food was logged. Every workout reported back. There wasn't room for me to feel proud or even human. I wasn't living my life anymore. I was just following orders, waiting for someone else's approval that never came. Daniel, her fiancé, was the only one who didn't pile on. Whenever we crossed paths, he'd give me a polite nod or ask how work was going. He never made jokes about my body, never added to the pressure. But he kept his distance. He was always careful, always neutral, as if he knew better than to get in the middle of family business. It wasn't kindness exactly, more like he refused to take sides. Still, the absence of cruelty felt almost like a gift compared to everyone else. Week by week, my body started to change. I saw it in the mirror, the clothes getting looser, the angles of my face sharper. People outside the family started to notice too, offering compliments I didn't know how to accept. But inside, I wasn't lighter. If anything, I felt heavier. Every pound lost didn't bring relief. It brought more resentment. The more they pushed, the more something inside me hardened. I wasn't proud of the changes. I wasn't motivated by them. Instead, a quiet fury was building. Every smirk from Jessica, every pointed remark from my parents, every bland meal shoved in front of me, it all stacked up inside me, brick by brick. I was starting to realize this wasn't about making me better. It was about control. And the thing about control is, once you recognize it, you start looking for ways to take it back. The breaking point came during what should have been a normal family dinner. Relatives had gathered, the table crowded with plates of food and the usual chatter. For a while, I managed to stay quiet, focusing on my meal, hoping to get through the evening without becoming the center of attention. But Jessica never let a chance slip by. She glanced at me, smirking, then turned to our mother and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Remember when Em couldn't even button her jeans last Christmas?" Guess we're lucky she finally stuck to a plan this time. Laughter rippled around the table, not cruel from everyone, but awkward, nervous, the kind of laugh people give when they don't know what else to do. My mom didn't stop her, she joined in. She shook her head like she was reminiscing about something funny and added, "Oh, don't remind me. I thought the chair was going to break that night." The words hung in the air, sharp and cutting, disguised as humor. I forced a laugh, cheeks burning, praying no one noticed how hard it hit me. I wanted the ground to open up under the table and swallow me whole. The rest of the evening blurred together, voices buzzing around me, but those words stayed stuck in my ears. To them, I wasn't a person. I was a punchline. Later that night, while everyone else was cleaning up, I slipped away. I headed toward my room, moving quietly down the hallway, but paused when I heard my parents' voices coming from the kitchen. I froze, hidden just out of sight. My mom's voice was sharp and low. "We cannot let Emily ruin Jessica's big day. She needs to keep this up. If she backslides, it'll be a disaster." My dad agreed without hesitation. "Exactly. All eyes will be on Jessica. The last thing we need is her sister drawing attention for the wrong reason. She has to understand that." It wasn't concern. It wasn't love. It was shame wrapped in duty, as if my only role was to not tarnish their perfect picture. Standing there, listening, I felt something inside me shift. Until that moment, I had let myself believe this was temporary, that once the wedding was over, they'd ease up, maybe even recognize my effort. But that night, it clicked. They didn't care about me at all. I was an accessory they wanted polished for display. I went to my room, shutting the door softly, my mind racing. The humiliation at dinner, the laughter, the whispered conversation, it all churned together until the hurt turned into something sharper. I couldn't keep letting them treat me like this. I couldn't stay the family joke, the easy target, the project. Lying there in the dark, I made a quiet decision. I would no longer just endure. If they wanted to play with my dignity, if they thought I would bow my head forever, they were wrong. They might have forced me into silence that night at the table, but the sting of their words planted something new in me. For the first time, I stopped seeing myself as powerless. I didn't know yet what form it would take, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I wasn't going to stay their victim. Something in me was awake now, and it wasn't going back to sleep. It happened on a night when the house was unusually quiet. Jessica had invited Daniel over to go over some last-minute details, and I kept to my room, trying to avoid another evening of being reminded that the entire world revolved around her. I got up to grab a glass of water, padding softly down the hallway, when I heard voices drifting from the den. At first, I thought nothing of it, until I caught my sister's tone. Low, sharp, urgent. Something I wasn't used to hearing from her. I slowed my steps, not meaning to eavesdrop, but unable to stop myself once the words reached me. "Ryan doesn't mean anything, Daniel," Jessica said, her voice cracking slightly. "It's just a distraction. I swear, once the wedding is over, it will stop." My heart thudded in my chest. Ryan. That name wasn't random. He was Daniel's best man, his closest friend, the guy who had been by his side through college and every milestone since. The Ryan I'd seen standing tall and confident during planning sessions, always teasing Jessica with too much familiarity. The pieces fit together too neatly. Daniel's response was tight with anger. "You expect me to just forget you've been sneaking around with my best friend? Do you even understand what you've done?" Jessica's reply came quickly, practiced. "It doesn't matter. You're the one I'm marrying. You're the one I want. Ryan was a mistake, just nerves before the big day. Please, don't let this ruin everything we've built." I stood frozen in the hallway, the cool glass in my hand forgotten. It was like a curtain had been pulled back, revealing the truth about the sister my parents worshipped. The flawless daughter, the shining bride-to-be, was nothing more than a liar covering her tracks. She wasn't the perfect woman they praised. She was reckless, selfish, and playing two men at once. The shock hit first, hot and dizzying. Then came something else, an unexpected rush that spread through me like fire. For years, she'd been elevated above me, the standard I could never meet. And now, I held a secret powerful enough to shatter that image completely. Daniel's voice softened, pained. If I go through with this, Jess, it's because I'm choosing to believe you. But if I find out you're lying again, his words trailed off into silence, heavy with warning. Jessica sniffled, no doubt putting on her fragile act, the one that always got her out of trouble. You won't regret it. I promise. Everything will be perfect once we're married. I slipped back to my room, careful not to make a sound, my pulse racing. Closing the door behind me, I leaned against it, trying to process what I had just learned. My sister's empire, built on appearances and charm, wasn't stable at all. It was cracked at the foundation, and I was the only one who knew it. For the first time, I felt something I had never felt in this family dynamic: leverage. My parents couldn't silence me with shame anymore, not when I carried a truth capable of toppling their golden child's throne. My sister wasn't untouchable, and her perfect little world wasn't safe. The power I had been denied my whole life now sat squarely in my hand, and I wasn't about to let it slip away. The rehearsal dinner was held at a polished banquet hall, all white tablecloths and glittering glassware. From the moment I walked in, it was clear the evening was designed to showcase Jessica. Every eye turned to her as she floated around the room in a pale blue dress, smiling and laughing as if she were already the bride. My parents followed close behind her, beaming like they had personally arranged the entire universe for their eldest daughter. I took a seat at the far end of the long table, doing my best to blend in with the cousins and distant relatives. The spotlight never shifted my way, not once. When the toast began, my dad stood and raised his glass. To Jessica, he said, voice swelling with pride, the most beautiful bride-to-be any father could ask for. She's always been driven, graceful, everything we could ever hope for in a daughter. His words rolled on, piling praise so thick it nearly smothered me. Not a single mention of me, not even a nod to the changes they had forced me through. It was as though the months of work, the exhaustion, the hunger, didn't exist. My mother chimed in after him, telling a story about how Jessica had been special since childhood, destined for greatness. The guests clapped politely, their smiles fixed on her, while I sat quietly in my chair, hands folded in my lap, shrinking smaller by the second. When Jessica took her turn to speak, she glanced at me deliberately, her eyes glittering with a smugness only I could see. I'm so grateful to everyone for supporting me during this busy time, she said sweetly. Then, with a tilt of her head in my direction, she added, and especially to my little sister, who's been working hard not to distract from the photos. I know that's not easy. Laughter bubbled up again from the table, though this time it carried an uncomfortable edge. I smiled thinly, pretending her words didn't sting, pretending I wasn't grinding my teeth so hard my jaw ached. On the outside, I looked calm, polite, even agreeable. On the inside, I was burning. Every compliment they showered on her, every condescending word tossed my way, only fanned the flames higher. I had followed their rules, done everything they demanded, and yet here I was, still invisible. Thinner, yes, but still treated as though I didn't belong. The message couldn't have been clearer. No matter what I did, I would never be good enough in this. Jessica would always be their shining star, and I would always be cast in the shadows. But what none of them realized was that I wasn't powerless anymore. As I watched Jessica bask in the glow of admiration, I reminded myself of the secret I carried, the one truth that could rip her carefully crafted image apart in an instant. I stayed silent through the rest of the dinner, my expression calm, my posture straight. Not once did I let my anger show. Let them think I was still the quiet, compliant sister. Let them think I had accepted my place at the edge of the room, because soon the balance would shift, and when it did, none of them would see it coming. I waited until most of the guests had drifted out of the hall, and the noise had quieted down. The rehearsal had ended, but small groups lingered, laughing and drinking at the bar near the lobby. That's where I found Ryan, slouched against a stool, nursing a glass of whiskey. His tie was loosened, his eyes bloodshot, his expression sour. He looked nothing like the charming best man everyone else had seen earlier in the night. I hesitated, but then walked over. Mind if I sit? I asked, keeping my voice casual. He smirked bitterly, waving at the empty seat. Sure, why not? Not like anyone else wants my company tonight. For a few minutes, I let the silence stretch between us. Then, without prompting, he leaned closer, his breath thick with alcohol. You know your sister's been playing me, right? His words slurred, but the meaning was sharp. Says I'm special, says she loves me, but she won't cut him loose. Keeps promising me things you'll change after she's married. He laughed, but it wasn't amused. It was hollow, angry. I didn't act surprised. I simply tilted my head, as if I'd suspected. And you believe her? His jaw tightened. I used to. Not anymore. I'm done being her backup plan. He took another drink, then slammed the glass on the counter. She doesn't get to humiliate me like that. Not in front of everyone. Not after everything she said. I leaned in, lowering my voice so only he could hear. Then maybe you shouldn't stay quiet. Maybe she deserves to be shown for who she really is. His eyes flicked to mine, suspicious at first, then thoughtful. He was drunk, but not so far gone he couldn't recognize the truth in what I was suggesting. I didn't need to give him details. I didn't need to expose every word I'd overheard between her and Daniel. All I had to do was plant the seed. And Ryan, with his bitterness and jealousy already bubbling over, was fertile ground. I nudged gently, letting him vent, letting him stew in his own anger until he reached the conclusion himself. Imagine, I whispered, if everyone knew before she got what she wanted. If she couldn't keep playing both sides. He clenched his fist on the counter. His voice dropped to a growl. Maybe it's time she got what's coming to her. I sat back, heart pounding, but my face stayed composed. I had given him just enough. I didn't have to orchestrate the whole thing. I just had to let his resentment and her lies collide at the worst possible moment. As I walked away, I felt a strange mixed twisting in my chest. Terror, because I had no idea exactly how it would play out. Exhilaration, because for the first time in my life, I was no longer helpless in the shadow of my sister. I wasn't the one being controlled. I was steering the storm. The plan wasn't neat, it wasn't precise, but it didn't need to be. All it required was pressure in the right place, at the right time. And now, that pressure was set to erupt in front of everyone who had ever treated me like I didn't matter. The countdown to chaos had begun. The morning of the wedding arrived heavy with nerves. I opened my eyes before the alarm, my stomach twisted tight, though not from fear of being judged anymore. Something else ran through me now, an electric current of anticipation. Downstairs, the house buzzed with activity. Makeup artists unpacked brushes, stylists laid out gowns, relatives crowded in with cameras and chatter. I slipped into the dress my mother had chosen, smoothing the fabric over my hips, and walked into the whirlwind. Immediately, her eyes swept over me. "Stand up straight," she snapped, tugging at the neckline. "And for God's sake, don't mess this up. This is Jessica's day, not yours." My father chimed in with a gruff nod. "Just stay out of the way. No distractions." I nodded obediently, lips pressed together to hide the faint smile tugging at the corner. If only they knew how little control they had left. By the time we reached the venue, sunlight spilled through tall windows, glinting off chandeliers and polished pews. Flowers lined the aisle in neat, fragrant rows, everything arranged to perfection. Guests filed in, whispering their admiration for Jessica's taste, the elegance of it all. I took my place with the bridal party, folding my hands and watching the doors at the end of the aisle. My heart pounded, though not with dread. Today wasn't just hers anymore. The music began, soft and swelling. Gasps filled the room as Jessica appeared, radiant in white, veil trailing behind her like a banner of triumph. She walked slowly, milking every step, smiling with that same polished confidence she'd worn her whole life. My parents glowed with pride, eyes glistening, as though their masterpiece had finally reached its grand unveiling. But I wasn't watching her. My gaze slid down the row of groomsmen until it landed on Ryan. He stood stiffly, jaw clenched, eyes dark with something barely contained. His hands flexed at his sides, restless, his attention fixed not on Jessica, but on the man waiting at the altar. Every detail of the ceremony blurred at the edges, the flowers, the murmurs, the shimmer of Jessica's gown. What stayed sharp was Ryan's expression. Anger simmered beneath his polished exterior, the kind of fury that couldn't stay bottled forever. I drew in a slow breath, steadying myself. I knew the explosion was coming. The question was only when. My parents sat blissfully unaware. Jessica paraded down the aisle as though untouchable, and Daniel smiled at his bride-to-be with devotion that wouldn't last much longer. And me? I stood silently, my lips curving just slightly. For the first time, I wasn't the forgotten sister in the corner. I was the one holding the match, waiting for the flame to catch. The ceremony moved forward with smooth precision, every detail timed to perfection. Jessica and Daniel faced each other at the altar, their hands clasped, smiles staged for the crowd. The officiant spoke of love, devotion, and the promises they were about to make. Guests leaned forward, enchanted, their eyes locked on the glowing couple. Then came the moment of vows. Daniel's voice shook with emotion as he spoke his words, declaring loyalty and commitment. When it was Jessica's turn, she beamed, ready to deliver the lines she'd probably rehearsed in the mirror for months. She opened her mouth, only for another voice to cut sharply through the stillness. "Stop," Ryan said, loud enough to echo across the hall. Every head snapped in his direction. He stepped out of line, his face hard, his tone vibrating with anger. "You don't get to stand here and promise loyalty when you've been lying this whole time." Gasps rippled through the pews. The officiant froze, eyes wide. Daniel turned slowly toward his best man, confusion tightening his features. What the hell are you talking about? Ryan didn't hesitate. She's been with me. While planning this wedding, while smiling in your face, she's been sneaking off with. And don't let her pretend otherwise. I can tell you every detail. Murmurs exploded among the guests, shocked voices overlapping as people craned their neck. Jessica's cheeks drained of color, but she forced a laugh. He's drunk. He doesn't know what he's saying. But Ryan pressed on, louder now, his words sharp and precise. Last month, after your bachelor dinner, she came to my place. The night you thought she was at the spa? She wasn't. Ask her about the bracelet she left behind in my apartment. The room went silent again, heavier this time. Daniel's face hardened, disbelief giving way to realization. He looked at Jessica, his voice shaking. Is it true? She stammered, searching for words, but nothing came out clean. It was nothing. It didn't mean. Her sputtering only fed the storm. Whispers swelled all around. Relatives leaned into one another, covering their mouths as they repeated Ryan's accusations. Friends exchanged stunned glances, eyes darting from Jessica to Daniel, back to Ryan. At the front row, my parents sat frozen, horror carved into their faces. Not horror at their daughter's betrayal, but at the disaster unfolding in front of so many witnesses. My mother's hand gripped my father's arm as though trying to will the scene to stop, but it only escalated. Daniel released Jessica's hands like they burned him. His voice cracked, thick with betrayal. How could you do this to me? With him, of all people? Jessica reached for him, desperate. Please, it was a mistake. It doesn't change how I feel about you. He stepped back, shaking his head, eyes blazing with rage and grief. And in the middle of the chaos, I remained perfectly still. My hands folded neatly in my lap, expression calm, while the world Jessica had built crumbled around her. I didn't gloat, didn't smirk, didn't need to. Watching it unravel was enough. The whispers grew into a roar, the perfect image of my sister shattering piece by piece. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible. The ceremony never resumed. After Ryan's outburst, the officiant tried to regain control, but it was useless. Daniel ripped off his boutonniere, tossed it aside, and walked straight down the aisle, his face twisted with betrayal. Guests rose to their feet in stunned silence, watching him push through the doors without a backward glance. His mother hurried after him, heels clacking on the marble floor, her expression unreadable. The wedding was finished before it had even begun. Jessica stood frozen at the altar, veil trembling with every shallow breath. When the whispers around her swelled, she finally broke, running after Daniel in her gown, calling his name. He didn't turn. The doors shut hard behind him, sealing the moment like a gavel strike. The golden future my family had pinned all their hopes on was gone in an instant. The hall descended into chaos. Some guests left quietly, shaking their heads. Others lingered, murmuring in corners, trading fragments of gossip like currency. My parents rushed to Jessica's side, fussing over her as though she were the victim. My father barked at Ryan, ordering him out. My mother dabbed at Jessica's tears, whispering frantically, desperate to contain the damage. I slipped away from the front, making my way toward the side hallway. But Jessica found me before I could escape. Her face was streaked with mascara, eyes wild. You, she hissed, jabbing a finger at me. You did this. You couldn't stand me being happy, so you ruined everything. I didn't flinch. I didn't deny it. I just met her glare and said evenly, for once, I wasn't the one who ruined anything. The fury in her expression cracked, replaced by disbelief. She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. She turned on her heel, storming off to where our parents hovered, trying to shield her from the staring eyes. Not long after, my parents came for me. My mother's voice was sharp as a blade. How could you let this happen? Couldn't you have stopped it? My father added, this family is humiliated because of you. Their words washed over me without sting. For the first time in my life, their anger didn't reach me. They could yell, accuse, twist reality all they wanted. It no longer mattered. The weight of their disapproval had lost its hold. I walked past them, calm, steady, refusing to shrink under their glares. That's when I noticed the shift. Cousins, uncles, aunts, faces I had grown up with, were looking at me differently. Not with pity, not with scorn. Some even nodded, subtle gestures of understanding. A few approached quietly, offering soft words of sympathy, as though they knew, finally, who the real scapegoat had been all along. Their kindness didn't erase the years of dismissal, but it did something unexpected. It reminded me I wasn't alone. Not everyone believed the version of events my parents clung to. Some had seen through the cracks long before today. By the time I left the hall, Jessica was still sobbing in my mother's arms, my father barking orders at staff to escort Ryan out. The Carter family's perfect facade had collapsed in front of everyone, and no amount of damage control could piece it back together. And I walked out with my head high, lighter than I had ever felt. Within weeks of the disaster, I packed my things into cardboard boxes and left my parents' house for good. No arguments, no drawn-out speeches. Just a quiet goodbye to the walls that had held years of criticism. I found a small apartment on the edge of town, nothing fancy, but it was mine. For the first time, I woke up in a space where no one monitored what I ate, no one watched how I moved, no one compared me to anyone else. The silence was freeing. I poured myself into work, staying late not because I had to but because I wanted to. My career had always taken a back seat to family drama, but now it became my anchor. Each project finished, each raise earned, felt like a victory I owned completely. I stopped counting calories, stopped obsessing over mirrors. The number on the scale no longer dictated my worth. Meanwhile, the fallout from the wedding spread quickly. Jessica's flawless image, the one she had paraded around for years, was shattered. Friends distanced themselves. Whispers followed her everywhere. The engagement never revived. Daniel cut all ties, refusing to take her calls. His silence spoke louder than any public statement. Ryan disappeared almost as fast. No one saw him after that day, and rumors filled the void. Some said he moved across the country. Others claimed he couldn't face the shame. Wherever he went, he took with him the last pieces of Jessica's carefully constructed facade. My parents bore the weight of the scandal too. They tried to salvage their reputation, but the cracks were too wide. Neighbors who once praised their perfect daughters now looked at them with thinly veiled judgment. Invitations to parties and community events slowed, then stopped altogether. The empire they had built on appearances crumbled, leaving them isolated. I didn't call, and they didn't call me. Distance became its own kind of closure. They had chosen Jessica's perfection over my existence for as long as I could remember. Now, with that perfection gone, they were left with nothing to hide behind. In the quiet of my new apartment, I sometimes replayed the chain of events in my mind, the rehearsals, the whispers, the moment Ryan's voice sliced through the vows. Not with guilt, but with clarity. They had tried to mold me into something I wasn't, all for the sake of one glittering day. In the end, that day destroyed them instead. I didn't need revenge spelled out in fire or fury. I didn't need to shout or prove anything. The satisfaction came in silence, in knowing I had survived their control and come out stronger. Jessica had her gowns, her spotlight, her pedestal, but all of it vanished in a single afternoon. And me? I was free. I was building a life that didn't revolve around their approval. I was finally the one writing my own story. They forced me to lose weight for my sister's wedding. But in the end, it wasn't me who lost. It was Jessica. It was them. And I walked away whole. Do you think I was right to walk away from my parents and sister, or should I have tried giving them another chance? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.